a wonderful show in store about adoption. And we're going to have a lot of different perspectives, and we're going to talk about all kinds of things. So I'm just so delighted to have you all here. I want to just mention before we get started that you are more than welcome to call in and chat with us, ask questions when the moment moves you. And I know that there are plenty of people out there that I've chatted with in the last week that do have things to say. So please feel free to contact us on 919-518-9773. And if you like, you can also connect with us on Skype at Computers 2K Voice. So as we get started, I want to introduce Amnon. Are you there? Just say hello.
I'm
quick.
Hello.
All right. He's our man. He's the one that's going to keep everything straight. So we're happy to have him here this evening, as always. And I want to start our night off with this really great quote that I found this morning, and I just think it was very fitting. And I've been talking about it all day. So here it goes. Promise yourself to live your life as a revolution and not just a process of evolution. And that is by Anthony J. D'Angelo. Keep that in mind as you listen to tonight's show and as you go forward in your life, no matter what you do. Just make it a revolution, not be part of just the evolution. So our first guest tonight is Dr. Glenda Clare, and I'm delighted to have her in on the phone. She's the founder of Fragile Families Network. She has served as a health professional for more than 20 years with experience in public health and behavioral health. She has developed community programs and worked directly with members of populations impacted by chronic illness, compassion fatigue, HIV/AIDS, substance abuse, incarceration, domestic violence, foster care, and homelessness, and it goes on and on and on and on. She's quite a woman, and she does her own radio show. She has a lot to share, and she is the author of an upcoming book called Don't Adopt That Child. And with that, it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Glenda Clare. Hello. Dr. Clare, you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, you have a book coming out, and could you give us some idea of what this book is about and what prompted you to write this book?
Well, back in 2003, I went to a funeral. I went to my aunt's funeral. 2 weeks later, I found myself a single parent of an 8-year-old child, and it was an experience. It was an experience. I had not been a parent previously. I did not know that I was going to become a parent when I went to the funeral, and in fact, I did not know anything about the child prior to going to the funeral other than that she was my cousin, that she was my cousin's child, and that she was going to go into foster care. And I did not want a member of my family to go into foster care. So she came home with me.
Mm-hmm. And what happened from there?
I learned a great deal from that experience. What I have found out is that people that are put in that predicament do not have all the information that they need. They don't have all the information that they need to advocate for themselves, and they don't have all the information that they need to advocate for the child in their lives. When I left that court, they didn't give me the paperwork that I needed to be able to take the child to the doctor. They didn't give me the paperwork that I needed to enroll an 8-year-old child in school. They didn't give me anything, and so it was a continuous fight. And so through this process, I was a relative. My book is referenced, Don't Adopt That Child, what grandparents and other relatives need to know before they assume custody. I knew nothing, and for the most part, other grandparents and relatives who step in because they don't want members of their family to go into foster care, because they want the interests of the children in their families to be respected and honored, and they want good quality care for those children. They walk into a picture with their hands binded, with no knowledge, and if they don't walk in that door with as much knowledge as possible before custody arrangements are put into place, then their hands will be tied forever. And so that was the motivation for me to write this book, because grandparents and other relatives need to know more so that they can make good decisions for themselves and for the children in their lives.
So what would you have done differently with different information?
What would I have done differently? First, I would have found out a little bit more about why this child was removed from the custody of her mother. I didn't know why she was. In fact, I didn't even know the whole thing in terms of that my cousin had had her parental rights removed, that her mother had adopted her grandchild. I didn't know any of that. Basically, what happened for me was I went to a funeral, and I was called back and said, if you don't want this child to go into foster care, you need to be in court tomorrow. And that, was really not much to work on. I didn't have enough information. I knew that at the funeral I was hearing some things about foster care, and I was wondering, well, why are they talking about foster care? I'd never heard of that before at a funeral. Why would she go into foster care? So I didn't have any information. I didn't know anything about the dynamics of what was happening within the family. My family members, I was coming home to the funeral. I no longer lived in that area. I had not lived in that area for 15, 20 years. So it's like you, Marilyn, if you went back home to visit someone, you're there for the funeral, but you're not, you don't know all of the family dynamics. You don't live there. But I did know that I didn't want a family member to go into foster care, so I stepped up to the plate to try to do something, but I got very little information. And for the most part, I have found that is the predicament of most family members. Many family members do not know everything that is going on beforehand. Now, another thing that most family members don't realize is that when you bring a child home, there are extra expenses that come with that. There are records that you need. There are all kinds of things. Well, the average family member doesn't get that. In fact, the average grandparent and other relative that has custodial care of children don't even have legal custodial care. Now, I did have someone that at least told me, you need to go to court. and get something in writing. But a lot of people don't have it. They don't go to court. They can't put a child in school. They can't do anything. Now, I went to court to get things, but it took about 6 months before I got any of the paperwork. And still, to this day, even though the court said that I would get certain information, that birth certificates, Social Security cards, all of that, they never helped me to get that. People generally, the foster care system, so when a child goes into foster care, there is a stipend that people get to help them with basic things, to help with child care, to help with medical insurance. I don't think that the average person realizes that a grandparent on a fixed income, if they get children to come live with them, say, for instance, that grandparent is living in senior care, that grandparent can get kicked out of senior care. If children are coming into the household, the Social Security can make changes in terms of the person's income, but they've now got extra mouths to feed. So there's a lot of things to consider that the average person does not know, and they need to know this information so that they can advocate for themselves. Older children sometimes come into the family, and they are pissed. They are angry. They want to know, how come I can't be with my mama? How come I can't be with my daddy? Why do these things have to change? Well, you're the family member that just came because, like you're trying to help out. But you've got a person that is angry. And there are other dynamics that come with that as well.
Let me interject something here. So I think part of what I'm hearing you say is not only do you have to deal with the rigmarole of all the difficulties that you encounter because you're not given all the information. But then on top of that, you're also dealing with a child who can be angry because of coming into the house. And so are you also saying...
well, even beyond that. Mm-hmm. So I shared with you that the child that came to live with me, that she was my cousin's child. So just think about this for a moment. Now, you are my cousin. Okay, in this case, this is a first cousin of mine. You are my cousin. I walk in the door, and people are saying that you can have custody of my child, but I can't have custody. Do you think that could cause some feelings?
Amongst all the family?
Oh, yes. It could cause all kinds of dynamics, a ripple of dynamics. But who was there? No one. To say, okay, let's do some conflict resolution, because I'm coming in, as do a lot of other relatives. They're saying, okay, well, I'm just coming in to make sure the baby doesn't go into foster care. They don't know about all the other dynamics that they have just stepped into. And there are a lot of dynamics.
So there are a lot of dynamics that you're dealing with, all on multiple levels.
On multiple levels, yes. So these are all things that family members need to take into consideration. If I had known more on the outskirts, I would have said, okay, so for me to take custody, I'm going to need some respite care. We're going to need some family therapy, including Mama. Even though y'all say Mama has no parental rights, we're going to need some things with her, because guess what? Y'all say on paper that she doesn't exist, but she does exist. She exists to me, she exists to the child, and she definitely exists to herself. So, we are going to need that.
And I think that's so interesting because, I was taking part in some conversation this past week, doing a lot of research and talking to people in all areas of adoption, people that have been adopted, people who, and we have some guests coming on tonight who are going to share some things. And, it was interesting because I was trying to think of, so with the system the way it is, how would we make it better? I mean, how, and I'm throwing this out there because you dealt with, one area which a lot of people deal with. A lot of people deal with taking their grandchild, taking a family relative, There
are more than 7 million of us. There are more than 7 million of us. There are more than 7 million of us.
And of all the adopted, families, what percentage is that? Do you know?
Well, we're not necessarily considered adoptive parents. I never adopted the child in my life. I was a guardian.
You were a guardian.
However, the majority of people, as I shared earlier, a lot of people have never formalized a legal agreement. So they are not guardians. They didn't adopt. They don't have any of these papers involved here. They are just taking care of a family member.
But it doesn't take away the anger, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't take away the anger of the child. It doesn't take away the anger of the parent. And as a person who you're looking and saying, okay, so why are y'all all angry with me?
Right.
I'm just trying to make things better, and everybody's angry with me. Wow, maybe I should have just let y'all go into foster care and minded my business.
Mm-hmm. Right. When you talked about therapy for the mother, one of the things that I was listening to when I was listening to some of the conversations was how the system was not supporting the birth parent, and how there should be other mechanisms in place to support the parent. I mean, we have big hearts, many of us, to like you did, to help that child, take that child, care for that child. But then the child grows up and is angry because why did they have to be taken away from their parent? Why wasn't there, help for the parent? So it's very interesting.
What's interesting for me, prior to coming into this situation, which was part of my motivation as well, beyond being family, was that I was one of those people in the community that had always been one to encourage other people to adopt, to get into foster care. So when this occurred in my family, even though I was in the middle of my my doctoral program, getting ready to start my dissertation, I was looking at these things. I already knew some of the information in terms of, why people needed to get out and advocate to have children come back into the family. I was, there advocating for people to help children in foster care. Every child needs a home. I knew all of these things. I had been on the side in terms of being the therapist, working with moms, who were substance abusers trying to get back their parental rights. I had done those kind of things. But when I came into the situation, I found out that even I had a lot of misinformation, didn't have all of the information. And as I've gone through the experience and knowing now more from this side, have been around those other relatives that are trying to do things on behalf of their children, I come to find that there are a lot of social workers that will give misinformation, I don't think intentionally, but they just don't know. They don't know. They don't have a clue of the information. I remember there was one relative that I had encountered. She had her nephew living with her. She was, trying to get some things done. The father, the biological father, had said that he wanted custody of his child. And so, the social worker was telling her, well, you have to go to the court and do this and that and what have you. And I told her, no, that's wrong. And the social worker was, trying to argue with me, saying, yes, that's what needs to happen. This woman didn't need to go to court to do anything. She had legal custody of that child. He needed to go to court and petition the court against her. So I kept trying to tell the social worker, you're going to send her to all of these places to do all of this stuff. She's going to get mad. She's going to feel frustrated because after she's done all that running around, they're going to tell her that she wasted her time. Please listen to me. And I found that a lot of times, maybe they're meaning well, but they just don't know. As you said, the system is broken. There are a lot of issues within the system. What we do know is that if a child is going to be placed anywhere, that even though it is problematic, that being with biological family who have a sense of family, that have an identity that they can share with that child, they can share customs, traditions, they can show pictures of family members, all of that is important in terms of the health and well-being of the family. However, those grandparents and other relatives need support.
They need support.
They need support. Mm-hmm. And this crosses all races. I have met grandparents and other relatives that were black, Hispanic, white, all different kinds of people. This thing is not just an African-American thing. I've gone to conferences. This is across the board,
right.
Especially with us having things like HIV, hepatitis C, drug abuse. Drug abuse is a biggie. There are a lot of children that are living with their grandparents or they're living with other relatives. And other relatives could be an aunt, a cousin, a sibling, an older sibling. In
right.
some cases it could even be an extended family
right,
member,
right.
someone that's not biological, but it's cousin Sue
right.
that has always been close to the family.
Right. Well, it seems like that we I think, and I want to introduce Ann to come on now as well. I think that we have to be, from listening to you, and I'm listening to you hard, and I know a lot of people are, it seems to me that we need to take a look at this adoption, custody, guardianship in a bigger way, in a more of a community type of way than mm-hmm. what we are. And so hold on just a minute, Dr. Claire. I want to introduce Ann to our show tonight. Ann, you there?
Yes, I am.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Marilyn. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad you're here. I want everyone to know that Ann, I wanted some people to come on that have had some experience having been adopted, who have adopted, and just other perspectives, because I think that this is a big conversation, and we're not going to just do this once. We're going to do this multiple times. So Ann has stepped up to the plate, and she's an interesting story because she not only was adopted, but she adopted. and she also married somebody that was adopted. So she has a whole nother set of circumstances, but maybe not so different. But Anne, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine, Marilyn. Thank you.
Good. I'm so glad that you're here to join the conversation.
Thanks so much. And you can add to that I also had an adopted sister.
That's right. And this is what's so interesting also about this, Dr. Claire, is that her adopted sister was actually a relative of the woman that adopted Anne. And they both were adopted within a month or so of each other. Is that correct?
I was adopted at 5 days old. At 3 months old, they adopted my sister, who at the time was 4 months old.
And so what was the family dynamics then, and what could you add to what we've already been talking about?
Well, listening to Dr. Glenda Claire, I think one of the things she pointed out was when the family members want to keep the child in the family, they want to give them the heritage and the love and the nurturing that the family has and all that goes with it. And that's wonderful. I think that was the same reasons that my adopting mother finally was convinced to adopt her natural niece. But the failure in all that, from my perspective, was no one really at the time had ever done a full psychological evaluation on my adopting parent. And had they done that, I believe with my heart they would have discovered some information that would have made them perhaps not approve either of our adoptions, for sure.
So it was just so. Dr. Claire.
Well, I can, interesting that she said that, because I know that there were some things that I believe should have happened in my case. However, people were so happy to see somebody that wanted to take the children and not to put someone in foster care to, kind of, in a sense, when you put a child in foster care, it becomes very expensive for the state, because then they are the ward of that child and they have to take care of that child until that child reaches adulthood. So when you see a family member that's willing to step in, it's like, oh, well, let's just figure out how to get them with her. Mm-hmm. And so they don't have to do as much. So, there were some things that I think that they should have done. They should have done a home study for me. I never got a home study. In fact, I had to plead for the social worker to show up in court. I mean, my situation was totally ridiculous, because the child in my life, my cousin, she was on medication. I had to fight. I'm talking about daily phone calls multiple times during the day, and I'm trying to work. To call to say, hello, I know she has this medication. It's getting ready to run out. Can you help me to get this medication? I got information that was telling me that no, I couldn't get the medication. That nobody would give me medical records. I had to fight for 5 months to get medical records. Then I had to fight.
Is that indicative? Is that indicative of several situations when it comes to adoption? I mean, I know that when I spoke with you, wasn't it true that you didn't even know that you were told your parents had died?
Oh, yes, it's unfortunate, as I've read, and then this isn't every adoptee's case, because every story is different. However, I have become aware that in many adoptees' stories, they're cloaked with lies from some perspective, and that's what is so frustrating and can be so damaging. I happen to be born in an open state, so I was able to receive all my information medically, but the only reason I was searching was because of my own concern for my two natural children my daughter born with spina bifida, Colton, a tethered spinal cord. My son at 16 appeared that he had a curvature of the spine. And I thought, wait a minute, something's not right. I need to do a medical background search. And it was at that time that I found out my birth mother was indeed alive instead of dead.
Are you saying that they lied to you and told you that your birth mother was dead and she was not? Are you serious?
Yes,
Yeah.
she's serious.
Oh, my.
And I want to remind everyone out on the chat, because there's all kinds of people out there I know with other things to share. Please feel free to call 919-518-9773. That number again, 919-518-9773. And if you like and you want to connect with us on Skype, you can. Computers 2K Voice. So I know that there's several of you out there, and I know you all have some stories of Claire, there's been a lot of lying going on, because I know I've spoken to a lot of people, and they've been lied to several times about where they've come from. And here's somebody on the phone, right? Hello? Hello?
Hi.
Hi. Who is
Marilyn?
Yes.
This is Denise.
Hey, Denise, how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. So what have you heard tonight?
Oh, wow, I'm sorry. I still was listening, and my sound was coming back around the second time. I'm sorry, ask me
So
again.
what have you heard tonight? I know that you adopted a son. I have notes here about everybody that I've spoken to, because I don't want to forget anybody. So you adopted a son, right?
Well, we didn't legally adopt him. Our
Right.
story is a little bit different in that when my children were 6 and 9, I just wanted to teach them more about helping others. So at Christmas time, rather than, giving people money or whatever, we went to the homeless shelter in the city next to our town. And we found out about a family that was there, and we got their Christmas list for the kids. It was a mother that had come in from Puerto Rico, pregnant with 5 other children in tow. And supposedly when she got here, the family member she was going to didn't exist. And so she was put up in the homeless shelter. And so we got their Christmas list, and we bought them all Christmas presents and brought Christmas dinner and went over on Christmas Eve and just met them and spent time with them. And so we thought that was the end of that. But in January, my husband and I both had the same thought about, wonder how they're doing. And so I contacted the state, and they wouldn't give me any information, but they gave the mom my information. And she called me. And from that point, we just stayed in touch with the kids. We would bring them to my house and bring them to church and let them swim in the pool and stuff like that. Then, about a year later, the mom decided she was going back to Puerto Rico. And we'd gotten to know the children, and one of the boys in particular. And he did not want to go back to Puerto Rico. He was 16 at the time. And she was saying he was going to go, and he was saying he'd run away. And so the night before they boarded the plane, she'd already checked him out of school, done everything she was supposed to do. And the night before they were supposed to get on the plane, she finally gave in and told him he could stay. But he had no place to stay. And she didn't leave him any money. All she left him was the clothes on his back and the clothes that he had in his bag, and that was that. And she got on the plane the next morning and left. And so he managed to stay with friends, and he'd go house hopping. He was in the city. A lot of the people he lived with were on, state aid, and he wasn't allowed to be there, or there were horrific family situations, and he shouldn't be there. And so finally he called us one day and told us what was going on, and he eventually came to live with us. And at that point, we told our children, they'd gotten to know him, and we told our children that, could he come and live with us? It was, up to them as well. And if he came, that he would be treated as their brother and as our son. And were they okay with that? And they loved the idea. They thought it was fantastic to have an older brother. They were very excited. And we told him the same thing, that he was welcome to stay as long as he wanted, and that he had to understand that he would be treated as part of the family. The good, the bad, the ugly, there was no difference in the children. And so he agreed. But his mom just left him. So I couldn't get him back in school. The principal knew that he was signed out of school, so he used to have to hide from the principal to be able to stay in school, because I had no legal rights whatsoever. I had no right to take him to the doctor. I had no right to check him into school. The principal finally found out and decided to look the other way. The counselor was involved and convinced the principal to look the other way, because here was a 16-year-old who wanted to finish school. I went to the state and asked for their help, I made sure that she was no longer collecting money for him. They wouldn't give him any of that money that she would have collected to help with his support. They wouldn't do anything. They offered him a ticket to Puerto Rico, is what they did. They said, we can put you on the next plane, send you to Puerto Rico. And he said, no, if you make me do that, I'll run away. And we're like, no, you don't have to do that. And so once we realized that, this was it, then he was ours. And so from that point on, he just was part of the family. And thank God nothing major ever happened as far as medical issues where I would have had to do something. We did get the state involved. We did get a translator on the line, and we did speak to his mom and try to get her to give us some kind of, physical custody, some kind of legal custody, some kind of something. Not necessarily sign him over, lock, stock, and barrel, but give us something so that we could at least get him medical attention if needed. And she would promise she would, but she never did. She never did. And so our 16-year-old son at that time is now 37, and he is now married to a wonderful lady, and we have 3 beautiful grandchildren. And he is all ours. And there's nothing legal about it, but he's all ours. So that's our story.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, I mean, I know that my son, we have a son, my husband, he's adopted kind of, similar, and, but, raise him like his own and, and biracial.
Yep.
So.
And he's actually Puerto Rican. My husband's Portuguese. I'm French. So, and you got to remember, I'm 53. He's 37. So I was the same age as his mother. And so we, obviously would have been quite young having him. But what was really funny is that when he would introduce me as his mom, he asked us, can I call you mom and dad? And we're like, sure. And so he would introduce me as his mom, and people would do such a double take because here's this dark Puerto Rican, and I'm this fair.
She said she's tried
Frenchman.
on both her computers.
And it was so funny. It was so funny to see people's reaction to us. But what's really the irony of the whole thing, and what is such a blessing, is that his personality is so much more like my husband's than our biological son.
Right.
The way he raises his children, the likes, the dislikes, right down to food and sports. And we only had him since he was 16. Mm-hmm. But everything about him is so much more like my husband. And his children now, his son is the mirror of my son's personality, and his daughter is the mirror of my daughter's personality.
Interesting.
And there's no genetics.
Right.
It's phenomenal.
It's very interesting, I think. I think it's very interesting how it goes. Even my son is very much like my husband. So, Denise, thank you very much for sharing.
Sure.
It's
my pleasure.
Yeah, and I see, people are making statements on the chat about, different situations. Somebody said that their mother, did she believe that, or TJ believed that their mother was a black market baby adopted in the 40s, and they lie about it all the time. And then, so we know that there's all kinds of things going on, and this is a great forum to be able to share, personal stories as well as, what can we do? I mean, what can we do to make it better? What can we be more aware about? Even just the whole notion of adoption and the difference between adoption and guardianship and just, what can we do to make it better for all? I mean, we want kids to grow up in a family. So what is it that what can we do?
Well, I agree with Dr. Claire, and the state wasn't much help, but I certainly recommend it, and we had a wonderful experience. So
good. Well, thank you very much, Denise.
All righty.
I very much appreciate it. Stay by because we'd love to, have you share again. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thanks.
I want to just again mention 919-518-9773. Again, 919-518-9773. If anybody's out there that you've been thinking about adopting, this might be a good time to call in and ask some questions of all of the genius that we have here, because I think just like anything else, it's each of us individually passing along information, and helping each other feel more empowered, because there's not one source to get all of this. But when you hear someone like Dr. Claire, personal experience, sharing what she went through, and Anne, I want to come back to you as well, and Denise, it's important because you get a little wiser. Maybe everybody's stories are different, but a little here and a little there, there's a pattern. There's things that to ask for that maybe you didn't ask for. Maybe you asked for the moon this time, but to better support each other. Plus, the children growing up, and there's a lot of anger. There's a lot of self-esteem issues. I mean, what do we do about that? With all the kids that are in the system being adopted. So, Anne, do you have any? What's your comment now? You have a son.
Yes, he was adopted at 3 days of age. I look for patterns also, Marilyn, so I agree with you. And there are, I don't know how many, putting a number to it's difficult, putting a percentage to it's difficult, but there are adoptees out there that do claim no problems, no anger, no issues. And maybe, the numbers I don't know, but the ones that are hurt, the ones that are wounded, the ones that feel torn because of a loss of identity, that so many of us felt it from as young as we can remember. And that's, 2-3 years old for some of us. And the education is not out there that I know of, that I'm aware of. I don't know that it's out there to really prepare the families for receiving the children, and to know, and to be psychologically savvy, to be aware. Everything I'm reading says adopted children, and I can't even imagine the ones coming out of foster care. I think they even have a far harder struggle because of the lack of stability.
And are they in the foster care system? Longer than a child in foster care waiting to be adopted. They're there for a longer period of time than a child that's adopted at birth.
From what I understand, yes, because then it becomes very a big paperwork trail full of all the legalities of everything. Once the state gets involved, once the government gets involved, there's an enormous amount of time that it takes naturally for everything that they are accountable to do, or at least it's been stated that they are accountable to do.
Right.
It's very difficult, and finding the right home, and then on and on. It becomes even more complicated. So yes, from what I understand, it's a much longer period of time. Right. And then, of course, you've got to think of all the children that are in foster care that have been taken away from their families that, and of course, I'm speaking about the ones that it's valid that they were unstable and unhealthy and dangerous for the child to remain in. Right. So what about those children that are taken away from their parents? And even though the ones that are abused, they still love their mommy and daddy, and they're very confused. And so what help are they getting?
So Claire, hold on one second, Ann. Claire, I know you wanted to...
The younger a child can be adopted, the better. So I was listening to you, Ann, and I was thinking, wow, you were lucky because you got, although you said, maybe your adoptive mother had some other issues. But the younger a child can come into a family, the better. I've got friends that have adopted, children when they were 3 to 6 months, and then got the sibling of the first child that they adopted. That was wonderful because that child didn't have any information from another relationship. They didn't have that scar of wondering, wow, where's my mom and dad? Because they had only known the people that had adopted them. But the longer a child is, the older a child is, the more difficult it is for the child. And if the child has memories, for instance, an 8-year-old knows that they have a mother. Okay, an 8-year-old has interacted with a mother, and so there's all of these questions. Well, how come I'm not with my mama? How come that person gets to be with me and my mama doesn't? And other different kinds of dynamics. The woman that was just speaking, that was talking about the young guy from Puerto Rico, my goodness, what a blessing she was to him. But also look at it from another perspective. That child had made a decision that he wanted to go with her. He didn't want to be with the mother. So, that's a different dynamic.
Right. And there's so many different ones. That's why I said when I started tonight, we want to do this again. We want to give people a voice to share, what they want, what's possible, just their personal story. I mean, there are plenty of people out here who can't find where they belong. I mean, Anne is a great example. She found her birth mother, and by hook or by crook. And I know that there's others out here. Claire, there's a woman.
That's a double-edged sword, though, too.
Why is that?
Because I know of some birth parents that don't want to be found.
Well, that's
so what happens
right.
when you have the birth parent that does not want to be found?
Right.
They made a decision to give up their child, and then here the child is coming to find them.
Okay, somebody's on the. Hold on. Is somebody there? Okay. If somebody was just calling in, please feel free to call back again, but you'll have to move away from the computer that you're at and go into a different room so that we can hear you, because I'd love to hear what you have to say. But you're right. Some people don't want to be found, but I don't know if that's enough not to look, because
no, I don't think and I think that young people, children, even if they're adults, a colleague of mine who actually was involved with the child in my life, she shared with me actually within the last month or so that she had been adopted by other people in her family, but she always wondered, well, why do I look different and what have you? And she found out that she was the child of a biracial couple, and the community said, oh, no, biracial couple cannot be here together. So mom had given her child away, but she never knew who her mother was, and she's just located. Her mother now is finding out that she's got siblings and all different kinds of things. She's kind of torn there, and then you still kind of wonder, so how is mom feeling about this? Does she really want to know? Does she really want to be around her? Because mom did willingly give that child up.
Right. Well, okay, so Anne, your mom was happy to be found, wasn't she?
She said, I asked her if my birth date, I told her my birth date. I said, does that date mean anything to you? And she said, yes. And then just kind of froze, and I said, what does it mean? And she said, a baby girl was born that day. And I said, I'm that baby girl. And she turned to her husband and said, it's her. And it was a beautiful, beautiful reunion. And we're together still, and I adore her.
So would you say that it's worth for an adult, or wherever you are, 16-year-old, 18-year-old, an adult that's looking for their parent, is it worth going the journey to find that person, regardless, with the hope that it's going to turn out right? Anne?
Well, I think you can't. It's hard to get rid of the hope. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to find as much about myself as possible. Mm-hmm. Again, we have identity issues. It's a very big struggle. Even though you're adopted at an infant, so many have the struggle. And so everyone, there's no one I've not spoken with that has searched and found their birth family, either parent or both parents, that regrets it. Mm-hmm. And they're not all pretty stories. Some do say no. Some say no and then say yes later. Some decide one may say, I want the relationship. The other one may say, no, I don't. Both may agree not to have it. Unspoken, my birth father and I have agreed not to have a relationship, but neither one of us spoke it. I think we just kind of knew it, and we both went away. But I'm forever grateful, forever, that he allowed me to come in.
I love what you said, because I think, and I think Claire is calling you now, and she has another lovely story. Hi. Claire, you here?
Yes.
How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. If you could just walk away from your computer, that will, because we're having some background noise.
Yes, sorry, hold on.
Okay. So now your story is a little bit different as well, because you were adopted and taken to England, right?
No, I actually came from England.
Oh, you
that's
came
where I
from
was
England.
born.
Okay.
And that's where my mother was. She was in north part of England, and then was taken away from her family to go to the south and down to London. They were very embarrassed by the whole situation and wanted nobody to know about it. So she was taken away. I stayed with her for about, I think it was about 8 weeks before my parents came and collected me. And actually, she didn't want to give me up when it came to it. And so my parents had to go away and come back about 2 weeks later. Mm-hmm. And then finally I went to my parents' house. I was, 10 weeks by now. And apparently I cried for about 24 hours inconsolably. Mm-hmm. And I was listening earlier, and I forget now, somebody was saying about how it's not so traumatic for a baby. And I agree, it's not. I think it's very different, but I think you can still have psychological effects that maybe you just don't realize. And here I am in my mid-40s now, finally realizing that many of my insecurities through my life have probably come from being adopted. When I first met my mother, it was very emotional. And when she left after 2 days of visiting me, I don't think I've ever been so inconsolable. And it was almost like I was reliving being left by her again on some very deep level.
Yeah.
And now your adoptive parents and your birth mom, you're all connected, is that right?
Well, we're all very good friends.
You're all very good friends.
Yeah, my mother actually almost sees my parents as the kind of parents she wished she'd had. Her parents are very strict, Victorian, unloving, very distant from her. And so she sees my parents and how amazingly loving they were. And I think she also feels very grateful that they did give me such a good life. We go on vacation together. My mother just came over recently with my half-sister and her new baby to stay with us. I've been so fortunate. But her parents were not happy about this. Talking of grandparents, I think Dr. Claire had said about helping grandparents to be prepared. I think my adopted grandparents were not prepared, and they actually didn't speak to my mother for the first couple of months of her adopting me. They were absolutely disgusted that she'd adopted a baby. But once they met me, they of course changed their minds. But my biological grandparents wanted nothing to do with me at all.
Hello? Oh, she did? Okay. Well, she'll come back. Claire, you come on back. These stories are just extraordinary, aren't they?
And one of the things I'd like to say, Marilyn...
Can you talk up a little louder, Claire? Claire, can you talk up just a little louder?
One of the things I'd like to say in relation to what she just said, so she was talking about reactions of grandparents that were not the primary custodians. So when I'm talking about grandparents and other relatives, I'm talking about grandparents and other relatives, no matter how old these people are, that become the primary caretakers for these children as though they were their own. So the situation that she just explained, with the reactions of grandparents once she was brought into the house of their child is somewhat different.
Right. And it appears that, I don't know what we're going to discover, but I would love to see some kind of discovery of, so you have these children, all ages, being adopted, foster care, whatever, and now here's Claire, who grew up with adoption. Then her parent, her birth mother comes into the scene. They're getting along, but she still feels like her self-esteem is not where she would like it to be. What are we going to do about that? What are our options? I mean, what is it? Is it the therapy along the way that makes the difference? I mean, is it because we are not paying attention to the fact that there is something missing when we have these children, and that we avoid thinking that everything is okay, and or we avoid thinking that everything is not okay?
Well, what comes to my mind is that, okay, so whether you're adopted, whether you're with your natural parents are flawed.
Every parent.
They just are.
Right.
They are flawed.
Right.
We all got issues of some sort. Everybody can come up with something that
right.
mama, daddy, cousin, somebody just didn't do something right. And we have to make a decision as we become adults to say, you know what, so everything is not perfect now. What am I going to do? Am I going to enjoy my life, or am I going to be miserable? Which one is it going to be?
Right.
Right. I think we have to make that choice, and then we have to figure out things to do to make that happen, because everybody is walking around with a hole in their heart about something.
Right, so it's society.
Everybody can find something.
Right, so it's society.
I think it is.
Issue.
We got all of these false expectations that we need to have all of these things. And really what I think is we need to all kind of learn to just be okay with who we are, with our flawed selves, whoever it is that we are. Let me love me first, and then I can learn to love other people.
So that's the trick, loving ourselves. So here we go, Anne. That concept of loving yourself. How do you do that when you grew up with a mother, an adoptive mother that you had that told you, "Don't touch me ever," and you've been, you think your mother, your birth mother, doesn't want you. How do you grow up asking for that love? How do you grow up feeling like you earned it, you deserve it, that you are loved? How do you do that?
It's a big struggle, because from everything I've read, children, and Dr. Claire is correct, it doesn't matter whether it's an adopting family or a natural family, if the child isn't nurtured in the ways that it needs, if it doesn't feel safe, if it doesn't feel wanted, if that child lacks those basic human needs, from everything I've read, they're going to be scarred, not in just their hearts, but their brain is wired differently. There are studies done. So once the damage is done in a child, the formative years, even more studies recently about, it's always said the first 5 years are the formative years, where there's brain studies now. I love neuroscience. I'm reading all kinds of books to learn more about it, because the brain is hardwired in a way that makes it very difficult to believe any truth about oneself that have value if the child is treated valueless. Mm-hmm. It's just a fact. Mm-hmm. I don't like it, and it doesn't matter adopted or non-adopted. It's just a fact. However, from my own experience, and again, speaking with many adoptees and reading many books on the subject, especially the book Primal Wound, if I have that correct, I believe that every adoptee comes with an extra stumbling block. I'm going to, for lack of a better term, call it a post-traumatic stress disorder, right, from the separation from not only their natural mother, not only their biological mother, but their entire family unit. I mean, I look like my natural mother. I look like my biological. I sound like her. I have mannerisms like her. I felt all alone in the world. I would stand in front of the mirror crying for hours, looking into my eyes, trying to find myself as a young child and an adult too. So, the damage can be done at an early age, and it's across the board. It's not just with adoptees. I just think it's a tougher road for adoptees.
Right. Hold on.
Well, since you went there, I do want to share something. So I have a colleague who is an African-American male who grew up in a white family, in a predominantly white community. So there was no one that looked like him. There was no one that anything like him. In fact, he wrote a book called Black Child, I think it's Black Child, White Hands, something like that. But, you know, he shares his whole story. Can you imagine at least you were ethnically, well, not ethnically, racially with someone who resembled you? Could you imagine that everybody knows that you can't possibly biologically be these folks' children because they're both white and you are black?
Right. That's
living
my
in
son.
A white community.
Hold on. That's my son. Hold on just a second. Who's on the line now? Hello?
Barbara, Ann's mother.
Barbara, Barbara. Ann, Barbara, Ann, I'm tongue-tied. Ann, your mom's on the phone. Barbara.
Yes.
How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing wonderfully well, thank you.
So thank you so much for calling in. We so appreciate it. I was so hoping you would.
I had difficulty getting in, but I'm there now.
Well,
so where are we?
Well, good. Well, so you're the birth mother of Ann.
Yes, and to continue with what Ann was saying earlier, with the issues with adoptees, are abandonment issues, and they're very predominant in all adopted children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so how do you, as the birth mom, first of all, seeing Ann for the first time, what was that like for you?
Oh, it was wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely amazing.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Who had a question?
I just wanted to say that we have it videotaped.
Oh, you do?
And the first thing she said, the first thing I heard my mother say was, "Oh, she has my nose."
Oh my goodness. So Barbara, so as the birth mom, and you give your child up for adoption, what was it? So what would you suggest? I mean, you've heard some of the conversation now. We're talking about the self-esteem issues. Dr. Claire was talking about grandparents taking on, or family members taking on children. What would you say today in the way adoption is being done? How would you fix it? What would you do? I mean, what would you do?
Oh my goodness, that's an insurmountable question. The foster care system needs to be revamped. However, I have no solution for it because there are always children that need homes. I used to observe adopted children, and I really was struck by their abandonment issues. They just were alive and walking with them. It was just so apparent. But adopting when a child is first born, I think, is much more successful than when they're older. I adopted also my niece when she was 9 years old.
Oh my God.
And of course, everything was already built in then.
So you adopted your niece after you had given your child up for adoption?
Yes, and that's so interesting. There seems to be a correlation between people who have those issues, who have given a child away, also will adopt later on.
Dr. Claire, do you see that happening as well?
I'm sorry, I missed a little bit of that.
Okay,
so you can say
what
that again.
Barbara said was she ended up adopting her niece, right? That's what you said, Barbara?
Yes.
She adopted her niece that was 8 or 9 years old. And
Right.
She made a comment that said she very often will see that somebody who does give up a child for adoption then goes and, I guess, to soothing and trying to make right. She went and adopted her niece. Do you see that in the world that you're talking about with grandparents that they have given up a child and they go and adopt a relative?
Now that hasn't been the issue for from my people that are grandparents and other relatives, although I don't know her name, but she is definitely an other relative because she adopted her niece.
Right.
But, no, I'm not necessarily seeing that. In fact, what I am seeing is that people are stepping up to the plate to fill a need that they feel, they need to fill because they are family members. They're not always feeling that, I need to adopt a child. They're generally there because there is a need. They don't want their child, the child in the family to be out there with an identity crisis. They don't want them to be amongst strangers. They don't want them to be abused and neglected. Mm-hmm. They're stepping up to the plate because they care about their family and they want to provide for members of their family. They want to make sure that their children and their family get a good education, get the health care that they need, all of that kind of stuff, be as happy and healthy as possible. But I agree with what she said in terms of an older child. So there is that confusion. There is that abandonment. The thing that used to hurt my heart with my young cousin is we could go out somewhere and she would see a father and daughter together and ask me, well, what do you think my father looks like? Do you think my father would like this? I mean, it would just tear my heart apart. Right. And I knew that, she was thinking those things about my mother. Well, how come my mother's not here? Well, what can you say?
Right.
What can you say?
Right.
So, you know that heartbreak is there, but in my case, at least, my child, and it makes sense. She was a child, and even as an adult now, you look at these situations, and it's like, well, I love you, but you're not my mother. Why are you here? And that anger of, well, maybe if you weren't here, my mother would be here, although that would not be the reality. But there's all of those mixed feelings, all those mixed emotions, all that stuff. And what does a young person really do with that?
And I think
it's a longing.
It's what did you say? A longing.
A longing, always a longing to connect.
A longing. And so, since that seems to be the theme, the thread throughout all of this, to belong, no matter, Anne, when you found your mom, it felt better, but it didn't go away.
You're talking about the longing?
Yes.
Oh no, the longing for her that I'd had as a little girl. Again, I thought she had passed on, and then once she was alive, the little girl part of me that had begged and pleaded, "Where's my real mommy? I want my real mommy," was thrilled to find her and was so satisfied in so many levels, but that did not take care of my own emotional imbalances that had the patterns that had been set up in me as a child. I had to work through them, but I was blessed to have a mother that had got an education and social welfare mom.
Yes.
And she was so savvy and so loving and such a wonderful sage guide for me, that she was a big part, not the only. There were other people too, in therapy and counseling and self-help groups and self-help books. It was a battle for me to come alive again. But she was, yes, absolutely.
So what about the individuals who are not as fortunate as you were or Claire, that have not been able to connect, have not been able to find that information? What do you suggest for them, or what do you suggest for? Should adoptions be open? Should it still be the choice of the parent, the birth parent? What do you all think? Claire, could you just sum it up? What do you think? Claire, Dr. Claire?
Yes.
What do you think?
I think?
Yeah.
I don't know. This is kind of going away from my topic, which is, focusing on the grandparents and other relatives and what their needs are and how to help those children. This is a lot different. I'm not sure what to do about the system that we have. I do think that more support should be given to parents for them to be able to provide as best they can. However, even when support is given, sometimes the everything breaks apart and things don't work out. I think over and across the board, we just have to teach people to be a little more loving towards themselves and more caring. Beyond that, what can you do? Most of the people out here in the world, whether or not they've been adopted, are broken.
Yep.
We got people out here that are living with their two parents and don't know them. Don't know them, don't know their siblings. We just got too much stuff, and so I'm going off onto my private soapbox, but it's like we have too much stuff going. I think we need to get back to simplicity. People are not talking to one another. People are texting while they're sitting next to each other. People are not spending quality time, with one another. We need to go back to the roots of having basic relationships.
I think so.
Because this stuff that we have is just not working.
Right.
The whole thing in terms of parents. Half the parents are, please don't beat me up out here in the world, but half the parents want to be friends. They don't want to be parents. Children need parents. And we need to teach parents how to be parents.
That's right.
What are you putting in your body? I saw your past interview, Marilyn, about what are you putting in your body. Most of the kids out here are not even having a nutritious meal.
Right.
Spending quality time together. That I think is the key. I think relationship is the key, because when people are spending quality time together, when they know that people are interested in them, that they care about them, just for who they are, not for, I'm like Susan or, whatever. All of that is important. I'm thinking of a relative of mine who is interesting. I have this relative that I never knew existed, okay? So I am up there in years now, and I am finding out right before my uncle's death that he had another child that I never knew about. I always thought I was the first grandchild. She was the first grandchild. She was raised by someone that was not her mother and father, and she is perfectly happy. She thinks that those two people were the most wonderful people in the world.
Right.
So you never know, but those two people planted into her. She knew that she was adored by them. That was important.
But I think I do think that it and I think maybe because of the situation nowadays with drug addiction, with all the stuff that's going on, we are going to be forced to take a deep, soulful, spiritual look at how we are connecting anyway, whether it's, everything. And yes, as Ann said earlier, it's like, there's this extra thing in an adoptive family, an adoptive child's life. There's a thing in, I'm a stepmom. There was always a thing with my stepchildren growing up as babies, not babies, as young children, because I brought up children differently. So there are these things that we're just going to have to face and talk about. Anne?
Yes, I agree with Dr. Claire. Connecting is so important. But in order to connect, everyone has to be willing to take risks and be vulnerable. To really, really be honest and open and not be judgmental. And that's just something that's the establishment of what I believe helped my mother and I establish a really wonderful relationship, because we bared everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. No secrets. We had enough secrets with the adoption, but no secrets. And here I am. I'm naked before you, warts and all. And can we love one another in spite of our shortcomings?
That's scary.
And it
that's
is scary.
For a lot of people, that's really, really scary stuff.
And Mark on the chat said, we are boxed into a culture that puts legalism above humanism, and adoption is outside their norm. I think that's a pretty good statement based on a lot of things, that we've put legalism, and then the legal system isn't helping, and so, we've made it the crux of things, but we can't use it very well anyway. So we have to get back to our humanism, or maybe find it for the first time.
And wasn't it Denise that had the child that she took in and loved and nurtured and cared for, and there was no paperwork attaching? Is because she knew how to love, she knew how to give, and she took that risk, and she was vulnerable but did it. So that's love.
That's love. Well,
but the child has to be open and willing to receive that love, because I have seen lots of children, those that are in the grandparent and other relative situations, those that are in blended families, where there is someone that's saying, hey, I want to love you, I want to do whatever for you, but the child is not receptive, and that is a reality.
Here is Barb, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Is there anything you want to add? Because I don't want to forget you're there.
Well, just that I have never seen a child that was not receptive to love. It depends on how that love is presented.
So I'm glad you said that, because there was a conversation on a chat recently that you shouldn't force love on somebody. But I think you can, because I think you can force it, because sometimes people don't know what love is. And I used to laugh about my stepsons when they were little. They weren't used to somebody hugging and kissing them. So, or at least not me. So I would kiss them, they'd run away. I'd run after them around the house. And then one day they stopped running. And now they love to give me a hug and a kiss. And we've experienced love together. And I think that you can.
It takes time. You just can't leap on someone and expect. It's just a process. And if people are willing to participate in the process, it will happen.
But people want to be loved. Even when they say no, mean yes.
Yeah. Bottom line.
I want to read something that's on the chat.
But there is what's called attachment disorder, and I know I have worked with attachment disorder.
Okay, so what is that?
That is an interesting
Yes, I have too.
Yeah, that can be interesting, because you've got the children want to be loved, but they're going to fight you, and in some cases can really hurt you. So, it's an interesting dynamic.
You get them in therapy.
Yeah.
And you work with them.
And that does, I went through a year-long fellowship dealing with that. It is not an easy thing. And, the older the children are, the more difficult it is. And there have been, even though people don't want to admit it and don't want it to happen, but there have been many failed cases where, the child's not wanting was stronger than what the potential parents could put in. You can't force anybody to accept your love. You just can't.
Betsy and Betsy on our chat, she said it's important to offer unconditional love, but so many parents, I think, are weak and feel unloved themselves as adults, and they seek love through their children, and it's a problem. And they're not strong enough. They're not strong enough themselves. An adoptive mother, may feel these boundaries that a birth mother may not feel, and have a hard time crossing that boundary to give the love that they so sometimes want to give. So I know. Okay, so where we are, I would love to do this again. Because I think that there's a lot of things to talk about, and in all areas of adoption, and I appreciate so much this opportunity to just to open the dialogue. Breaking free is about, you said it, just being able to talk about things, even maybe coming away. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yes, I was
I'm
just
going to
agreeing.
have to get off the line because I've got to take my mother to the airport. I thought we were going to be
Okay,
finished
is
by
that
9.
Dr. Claire? Is
but
that
thank
you?
you for having me.
Dr. Claire, is that you saying you have to
Yes.
get off? It was a
Yes.
pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. And you ladies have a wonderful evening. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Claire. You too. Drive
Thank
safe.
you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Barbara, were you just going to say something?
No, I'm sorry. I just said bye-bye to Claire.
Yeah, I think it's a great conversation, and that's what Breaking Free is about. It's about opening up the dialogue, and sometimes going where it's not comfortable. But how else are you going to get free if we don't?
Well,
Go ahead.
I think it's a different path for everyone. No one's path, no one's story is the same, but I think there are commonalities on support and ways to do it that we can kind of like a smorgasbord. If we knew what they were and the possibility of those tools and how to use them, then I think that we could go through our journey a little easier and maybe a little quicker. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people don't know what they are. They don't even look for them. They're not aware.
So you've done really well, and go ahead.
In the last 5 years of my life, I'm 59 years old. It took me that long, and it wasn't just all of a sudden poof. I'm happy, but all the work I did finally culminated. When I started therapy back 22 years ago, or even before then, I believe. I was told it could take a long time, and I would have to devote myself to it. Well, I didn't think I was valuable enough to do the work for myself, and that's just the way it was. Mm-hmm. And so my therapist said, find something that is worth living for and do it for that reason.
Right.
And I said, my children. And so I worked hard on myself to give them the heritage of a happy mother because they didn't have one. All they knew was a very depressed, sad, and not 24/7, 7 days a week, but enough that it definitely affected them. Mm-hmm. And that was the gift I wanted to give them, to be well, to be happy.
I often will tell someone, sometimes you have to pretend to be it. Sometimes you have to take something on even when you don't believe it, but it might be the right thing, but heart's not connected to it yet. You take it on, and that's what you did. I just want to ask also, because you might know this, Anne, Larry the Brave is asking, he was trying years ago to help someone connect with their son. Are there services out there that help you connect with a missing person? Or someone you're trying to find as far as a parent? Are there services? What's the route?
We're speaking adoption.
Are there services out there that can help adopted kids find their real parents?
There are, and there's lots of what they call themselves search angels. Mm-hmm. There are some support groups. There's more support groups for helping you find, and there's many different services online, internet websites where you can register and you put in your identifying information such as the birth date, the county, the state, the name of the hospital. And so if a birth mother were to do that, in fact, that's how my adopted son came to be able to know his birth mother. Because she had done that years ago, and so when there was a match, they then can choose whether to be in contact or not.
Got it. Well, I want to. There's a phone call. Hello.
Hi. Yes, this is TJ.
Hey, how are you?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey. So what?
Hi.
So what have you listened to? What have you? You need to move away from your computer so we can hear you better.
Well, I'm going right now.
Okay, good.
Is that better?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to mention, hi, Anne. Mention.
TJ is saying hi to you, Anne. Yes.
I just want to mention also there is DNA search that we have available to us now. that can really help you find what area your family came from, and then it even gets down to, your family tree. And if you have, like in my case where my mother was picked up in Indianapolis and money was exchanged and the judge was paid off, which happened in the 40s a lot during the Depression. My mother searched her whole life to find her family, and she never did get the DNA search. So that's what I'm doing now, and I just wanted to mention that is available.
Okay. And is there a certain organization or some that you can recommend?
Family Tree DNA is what I'm working with now. And you can get that on the internet.
Tree DNA. Okay, great. That's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I appreciate you calling in. Thank you. Well, I would love to continue, but we're out of time. But I want to thank everybody that's been listening, everybody that's been on the chat. It's been terrific. Barbara,
yes,
you are an amazing woman, and I want to thank you very much for being here and showing up as an amazing woman.
Oh, thank you ever so much.
It's my pleasure. And Anne, we're not done yet. You're terrific, and I know you have a lot to share and a lot of great wisdom and things to help a lot of people with. So I want to thank you very much for coming tonight and being so great all week long and being with me on this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Marilyn. I appreciate being with others that are more like-minded. Thank you.
My pleasure. It's been great. And everybody out there, thank you so much. Look for us to do this again and just to talk, and see what we can come up with and how many people we can help and share and pass along information and just make the world a better place. Remember, be the revolution, not the evolution. So I want to thank you again. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Sundays 9 a.m. till noon. Carrie's Psychic Cafe with Carrie Silkowski, Sundays 8 till 9 p.m. Health Inn with Debbie Bruck, Mondays 11 a.m. till noon. Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 8 till 9 p.m. One Chic Mama with Mary Michelle, Wednesdays 4 till 5 p.m. Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert, Wednesdays 9 till 10 p.m. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by ThatVidBlasterGuy.com, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.